place at the right time.
Can you tell them this section is reserved for the 10:30 service? Because they're coming in.
Those of you who I just told to move, remember you can't sit here at the 10:30 service. Sorry. It's reserved for 10:30, but come on over anyway. For me and Pastor Bill, you can just, be a little bit closer. All right, well, I know that you came expecting a breakthrough. I have been believing God for you for weeks and weeks and weeks. We've all been praying for Winter Bible Seminar around here. We are expecting breakthrough week. I hope you are too. Is there anybody here who maybe has been believing God for something for quite a while? You don't have to raise your hand, okay? You don't have to raise your hand because these are not things we want to talk about in public, but you've been believing God for something for quite a while and maybe haven't seen the results that you wanted. Just keep smiling. Nobody will know it's you. I think probably if you've been a Christian longer than about 15 minutes, everybody has something like that they're praying. And you may be discouraged about it. And so I want to just talk to you very shortly this morning about don't be discouraged and don't give up. Look at your neighbor and say, don't give up. All right, look with me in Matthew chapter 14. I know a lot of people, a lot of Christians who started out real strong believing God for something. There's something on their hearts. Maybe they have a need and they're believing God for it. They heard it. They heard the word. The word went forth, created a vision in their heart, and they saw themselves healed. They saw themselves out of debt. They saw themselves with their kids on fire for God. They saw their need met because they looked into the word. Or maybe God's put something on your heart to set your city on fire or set the world on fire. He's got a call on the inside of you. And you read the word of God and it gets stronger and stronger. We've all had good faith to start things sometimes. But how many know it's not how you start, it's how you finish? And how many know between the start and the finish, there's some stuff that goes on? You probably could all testify right about now to some stuff that's going on, right? Well, I want you to know that doesn't have anything to do with the fact that what you're believing for will come to pass. I want you to hang on. I want you to not give up. In Matthew chapter 14, I love this story, and you've all read it, but let's read it again. Beginning in verse 22, it's the story of Peter walking on the water. And it says in Matthew 14:22, immediately Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go before him to the other side while he sent the multitudes away. And when he had sent the multitudes away, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. And now when evening came, he was alone there. But the boat was now in the middle of the sea, tossed by the waves, for the wind was contrary. So we see here Jesus is sitting on the mountain praying, and his disciples are way far away in a boat on the lake, and it's getting stormy. Now, Jesus knew that somehow. Don't you love Jesus? So there he is praying. He's having his own prayer time. You ever go to have your own prayer time, and then some sort of emergency arises? Well, that's what happens with him. And so he knows that his disciples are out on this boat in a storm, and he decides to do something wild and crazy that up until then, nobody had ever heard of. Now, you and I have read this story a whole bunch of times, and we know what happens. Oh, yeah, Jesus walked on the water. But seriously, have you ever seen anybody walk on the water? No, and except for Jesus, have you really ever heard of anybody walking on the water? No, this is a big deal to walk on water. And I want you to keep in mind, it is supernatural to walk on water, right? You got to be above the natural. Not that many people in the natural just step out onto water and walk on it. Okay? So Jesus is in the boat, on the mountain, and it says here, the boat was tossed in verse 25. Now in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus just got up and decided to go to them. He went to them walking on the sea. Sometimes I love the Bible, don't you? It just says this calm little phrase like, yeah, walking on the sea. Like that happens all the time. And so it says Jesus went to them walking on the sea. That's unusual. We got something supernatural going on here. And so it says, and when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled. That's the New King James. In a couple other versions, it says, they screamed out of fear. And we think, oh, silly disciples, it's just Jesus. But I'm telling you, imagine being in the boat. It's dark. The wind is tossing. Maybe a couple people are getting seasick. We're throwing water overboard. We don't know if we're going to make it. And all of a sudden you look and you go, What is that? What is that? What is that? Right? That would be scary, wouldn't it? And here he comes walking on the water. Now, even though you and I have heard the story before, I bet if it happened to you, you'd be scared too. What is that? Who can walk on the water and come towards us? And so here he comes, and it says they're scared, and they say, it's a ghost. I guess so. They don't know what it is. You know, imagine it, they see it in the distance, and it starts getting closer and closer and closer. Wow! I get a goosebump just thinking about it. That's what meditating the word is, by the way. You know, you just put yourself in the story and think about what it'd be like if you were there. And so he says, but it says immediately, in verse 27, Jesus spoke to them, said, be of good cheer, it's I, don't be afraid. And Peter, I tell you what, when I get to heaven, I'm going to interview Peter about this very moment. Because I'm going to say, dude, what were you thinking? Because it says Peter answered him and said, Lord, if that's really you, then you bid me to come to you. And Jesus looked at him and said, no, 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 Peter. I'm the only one who can do this. Is that what he said? No. Did Jesus command Peter to come and walk on the water to him? No. Here's just a side thought I want you to think about. Peter just got this wild hair of an idea to come and walk on the water with Jesus. Well, if you can do that, can I do it too? Pretty nervy, I'm telling you. That is pretty nervy. And Jesus didn't say to come. Peter thought of it by himself. I wonder how many ideas you and I, with our born-again spirits, could just think of and ask God if it's okay, and he said, yeah, sure, go with what's on your heart. Sometimes you don't have to fast and pray for hours and days. You just go with what's on your heart. And Jesus says, come on, I'm with you. So Peter had now the word of the Lord on this crazy idea of his. The word of the Lord was, come. It only took one word of the Lord. And now Peter has the word of the Lord on it. And so he steps out of the boat, and it says here, look at what it says. Verse 29, so Jesus said, come. And when Peter had come down out of the boat, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. Everybody say, he walked on the water. That's a pretty big deal. Anybody here ever walked on water? Seriously? Okay, see, look around. I don't see any hands. Peter walked on the water. This story doesn't turn out so good for Peter, but you got to remember, in the middle, he did good. He walked on the water. Nobody ever had walked on water before this moment, and now there's just two guys. And it says, and Peter walked on the water. But do you know what happens to him? Verse 30. But when he saw that the wind was boisterous, he was afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, saying, Lord, save me. And Jesus, of course, in his great mercy, immediately stretched out his hand and caught him and said, O you of little faith, why did you doubt? Now, what happened to Peter? He was doing something so supernatural, nobody had ever done it before. Peter was walking on the water. And yet something happened to him. He saw the wind. You actually can't see the wind. What he saw was the results of the wind. He felt the wind. He saw the waves. And it freaked him out. Let me ask you this. If water was pure and smooth like a mirror and there was no wind and was no waves, can you walk on it without something supernatural going on? No. So guess what? Wind and waves have nothing to do with walking on water. Nothing. Why in the world would you let wind and waves scare you? You're doing something supernatural. It takes the word of the Lord to do what he did. Come. That's what was holding him up on the water. The wind and the waves were irrelevant. But they freaked him out. He got scared. And so Jesus, of course, reached out and rescued him. And he said, Peter, why did you doubt? Oh, you of little faith. Now, I don't think that Jesus meant tiny faith. Peter, why did you have so little faith? I think he meant a short duration of faith. Oh, you of a short burst of faith. Anybody ever had a short burst of faith? Just keep smiling. I think Peter had a short burst of faith. He heard the word of the Lord come. He got excited about it. He got out of the boat. He started walking, but then something happened. Have you ever started out believing something real strong, real good. You're excited about it. You got the vision for it. It says that Peter stepped out of the boat to go to Jesus. He had a plan. He had an arrival point. He knew where he was going. But something came along and freaked him out, and he stopped. And Jesus said, "Oh, you of little faith," short burst of faith, "why did you doubt?" Why did you doubt? You know that word doubt has the same words, D-O-U-B-T, the same letters as double, D-O-U-B-L-E. To doubt means to change your mind, to have a double mind. He started out real strong, believing that he could walk on the water because he had the word of the Lord on it, and he changed his mind part way because of something that happened. You know how we faith people, we know about not being moved by circumstances. But how many know it's easy to be moved by circumstances? Wind, waves, blowing, crashing, making you wet. At some point, I bet that maybe Peter couldn't even see Jesus because of the waves between them and him. So then he only had the word of the Lord to go on and not anything he could see.